Hello everyone, this is Overmind, and welcome back to another StarCraft 2 replay cast. Today I have for you a ZvP in which both of our players come to us from the prestigious Diamond League. So let's go ahead and hop right on into it. Spawning down on the bottom right side of King Sejong Station, in blue and representing Ammo G, we have our Protoss player, jaCE. Spawning up at the top left side of our map, facing a small amount of probe harassment, we have our red zerg player representing Notice, as well as Vortex Esports. It's going to be Ideaus. Now, Ideaus has chosen to throw down his spawning pool first, which is quite alright. Over here we have a small amount of worker micro. As jaCE moves to attempt to secure his natural expansion, it looks like a second probe has moved down to join the fray, so this will probably get cleaned up. And it looks like that drone is going to escape with his life. Here we do have that Nexus being thrown down. Likely this is going to be a Forge Fast expand, so that jaCE can expand fairly safely while protecting this area from any Zergling run-bys or early attacks. And indeed, there goes that Forge. Over here we have some additional worker micro, as jaCE attempts to block Ideaus from taking his own natural expansion. And in fact, that is quite important for our Zerg player to have, because not only is he reliant on it for an economic benefit, but also for the additional larvae, which will allow him to produce extra units. So quite good that he got that down, and we'll have that base up and running shortly. We do have a bit of a probe scout coming on into Ideaus' base, going to be able to spot that extractor that does tell jaCE that Ideaus has options. There could well be speed zerglings, could be some additional tech units later in the game, could be roaches or hydralis. I know that roach hydra or ling mutalis with eventually banelings is quite a good combination now on the ladder, so we'll see what Ideaus decides to spend that gas on once he has it up and going. I want to note that this probe is just kind of hanging out here near this third base, and if he's able to spot the timing of the third base, that would be quite good information for jaCE to have, because often you'll see a Zerg player either get his lair up and running, or take a third. We do have a few Zerglings around here which will deny scouting, as well as allow Ideaus to do some scouting of his own though. Back at our Protoss main base, we have our nice gateway up and running, producing a Zealot to help finish out this wall off. We do have a cannon here for protection at the moment. And we have our Cybernetics core just coming up, should be beginning to research Warp Gate, hopefully quite quickly. Looks like we're going to spend a bit of money on the cannon, and there we go, there's our Warp Gate research coming on up. Looks like we are pretty well saturated over here in our main base, and we're just beginning to saturate here down at our natural. Back at our Zerg base, we have Queens aplenty, and it looks like we're going to take both gas geysers at our natural expansion, which will mean that we're likely going to see some higher power units and a bit more teching. We do have Zergling speed on the way, as you can see. In the production tab, we also have our lair coming on up, which means probably lair tech, possibly mutalis, possibly hydralis with no roaches, which I have seen be successful on the ladder. However, often I'll see mutalis more commonly. And it looks like we have our tech choice of the hydralis den, which is a bit surprising to me. However, it certainly can work, and we'll see what Ideaus decides to do with it. We also have an Evo chamber for the upgrades. And a third base is going down as well for Ideaus. Now, of course, at this point we have our Protoss player who's done a very good job of building up his expansion. He's almost at ideal saturation for his base here. For those of you who don't know, 16 mining minerals and 3 in each gas is the ideal number of workers to have mining at any given base. And it looks like we've hit that limit. So probably jaCE will be looking for an expansion pretty soon here, and possibly he'll be considering moving on out at some point shortly, because it's often easier to attack and expand at the same time. We do have a Robo facility as our tech choice, and that is usually quite good against Zerg early in the game. We also have our Colossus Den coming on up, which will allow us to build the hard counter to Hydralis, by which of course I mean the Colossi. Here we have a hallucinated Phoenix scouting all around the base, and jaCE is probably feeling quite good about himself since he did in fact see that Hydralis Den. No sign of a Roach Warren anywhere. We do have a decent number of upgrades coming up for our Hydralis, as we can see from the Evo chamber as well as the Hydralis Den. This third base does not yet have drones mining. However, right as I say that, of course, we have several drones heading on their way over. We are building additional drones to power out that economic advantage at the moment, and our queen is over here to, of course, provide protection and inject larvae. We also have a good amount of creep spread, and we're beginning to build hydralisks, and often Zerg will only build attacking units if they intend to attack or if they are facing an attack. Of course, the creep spread goes a long way in detecting when an incoming attack might happen. However, since Ideaus doesn't really have any need to suspect an incoming attack at the moment, it could well mean that he's going to be a little bit aggressive here in the near future. Over here at our Protoss base, we have our first Colossus out on the field, and this is really a milestone moment for a Protoss player because that one unit is really the thing that you need to feel secure. Moving on out, we have enough sentries to protect it here. We have our gangly Colossus to do a whole bunch of power damage, and we have our Mothership Core to recall us home if we get in any trouble. So it looks like our Protoss player, placing a pylon here, might well be getting ready to head out, and indeed he is. Probably also may consider putting down an expansion as he's moving out across the map. However, we do have a decent number of units over here for Ideaus to defend. He's also going to have a very good idea that this is coming, given that he has a decent amount of creep spread here at the front, near where jaCE is approaching, and given that he's getting good scouting information from this Overseer periodically, as he has been throughout the game. Here we have a bit of our Protoss player moving on up the ramp. No detection yet for our Protoss player, so he will not be focusing on eliminating this creep spread. He's just going to come in and try and do as much damage as possible. Ideaus at this point producing many a roach. He has added on a roach warren to complement those hydralisks. He also has some additional hydralisk building, and of course he's continuing to build zerglings and get his upgrades. Here we have some very good force fields from our Protoss player. Lots and lots of time warps going on down. That Colossus has gone down, though. It was focus fired and killed off, which is quite important for our Zerg player because that was the big power unit in that army. Several of the Immortals have fallen, not quite living up to their name. There is one additional Immortal remaining in the army, and there are bits of units chasing other units around in Ideaus' base. However, of course, Zerg are able to quickly build a whole bunch of units. Looks like we do have a drone pull, which is very stressful, very frightening. However, as a Protoss player, I can tell you that those workers will be fired upon by the Stalkers, because the UI will force you to fire upon whatever the closest attacking unit is. So that was quite a good move as far as just defending that base. We have our few Stalkers retreating. We do have an additional Colossus joining the fray. However, I don't believe Ideaus is in too much trouble. He's been able to fend that off pretty successfully. He has additional roaches and hydralisks coming on up. Looks like we did just get detection over here, so jaCE is able to take out a large number of these creep tumors. This will eliminate a lot of Ideaus' vision over here. We have some additional force fields. Units are able to make their way around. The Colossus is pulled back before it can be killed off. Looks like we did lose a spine crawler there for Ideaus. And here we have two fairly large armies, Ideaus making a lot of difficult decisions here. It is very hard to go ahead and go, you know what, I'm gonna let him kill some of my creep and let him maneuver around on my side of the map, but not lose my units, because I need to make sure that I have enough to defend my bases. That's my priority. We do have our Protoss player expanding over here while all of this is going on, and a little Zergling is able to get a probe kill, so likely we'll have to warp in a Zealot over here to make sure that that base is secure. And this is quite a good move by jaCE. You want to expand while attacking as much as possible. Here we have an Overseer getting pretty much all the vision he wants. However, good play is not necessarily dependent on secrets, so Ideaus having this knowledge of what is coming is certainly an advantage. However, if jaCE can pull this off, he doesn't necessarily need to be secretive about it. And certainly Ideaus knows what's going on. He knows that this army is here at the front of his base. There is just one Colossus in this army, and right now, these force fields are really what's holding together this attack. jaCE is really trying to get rid of these spine crawlers over here, defending this little choke point. However, thus far he's been unsuccessful. Ideaus is doing an incredible job of holding on, and right now if we look over at the army supply, it is very, very close. Worker supply slightly in Ideaus' favor, which is not surprising when playing versus a Zerg. However, I do want to note that in the production tab we have 3 Vipers coming on out. What are Vipers, Overmind, you might ask? Well, Vipers are the thing that you hate if you are a Protoss player who has Colossi, because what Vipers will do is grab your Colossi, yank it into the enemy's army, and allow the rest of the units to murder it. It takes a lot of the power out of these power units, which is what Protoss is really depending on as he moves forward. So as I said earlier, Ideaus is making a lot of tough decisions in that he's letting a lot of his creep be killed off. He's just defending this area, making sure that he prioritizes having his bases be safe over running off and attacking willy-nilly. And now he's able to quickly and efficiently grab those Colossi, 1 down, 2 down, and now this army is very toothless. Aside from those force fields, this Protoss is not really in a good position. He does go ahead and throw out some hallucinated Colossi, which do soak up a bit of the damage. And certainly this is not a force that you should ignore by any means. However, losing those Colossi was a huge blow. Here we have our Vipers doing something kind of creepy. This is their consumption ability. They're going to go ahead and buff up their energy so that they can do the pole movement that we saw earlier again. And our Protoss player is retreating back. Now I do want to note that he has pretty well secured this expansion. There is a cannon up here as well as a warp gate, perhaps not ideally positioned. Often we have the warp gate off to one side or another to block the probe line a little bit better. And here we have jaCE doing a decent thing with his observer. He sees a good portion of this army and where it is headed, where it's going, and that is of course a very good piece of information to have. Over here we have a warp prism heading on out, which is quite scary, and it looks like jaCE is going to go ahead and try and secure a 4th base. Naturally, if you are up on an additional base, especially versus a zerg player, that is quite an advantage to have. However, we have a 4th base coming down for Ideaus as well, and he's going to go ahead and take both of those gas geysers, because he's going to keep building those power units. Now, I believe this Overlord likely saw, oh yes indeed he did, this warp prism, and it is in trouble because, oh, here we have a pull away preventing the warp prism even from warping in a single unit outside of Ideaus' base, and I think this Viper might actually pull it back. Warp prism down. That was a lot of energy spent by those Vipers, however they're going to use their special consumability to go ahead and power up their energy once again so they can continue to be aggressive and be effective as part of this army. Here we have our 4th base coming up for our Protoss player, our 4th base coming up for our Zerg player. Our Protoss army looking a bit frightened as the Zerg army approaches these bases. Now at this point we're going to have a minor pylon pickoff, nothing hugely massive in the way of dealing damage to our Protoss player. However, it looks like we might have our big engagement here. We have a bit of army positioning, a bit of jockeying around. We do have storms up for our Protoss player. However, we see the grab on those Colossi, 2 of them down. It pains me almost to see those. The mothership core is pulled. We have additional pulls going on. We do have some force fields, but I believe it may be too late. These sentries here are really effective as force fielders. However, they are quite expensive units, and they are quite weak units. We have some additional hallucinated Colossi pulled on in to soak up the damage, which they do quite well. However, this army is hugely outnumbered as Ideaus marches in to this 3rd base for our Protoss player. I want to go ahead and look. It's 133 to 12 in army supply, and that is GG. So excellent job, Ideaus. Thank you so much for sending in this replay. I enjoyed watching it. I hope you all did too. For those of you who want to submit replays to me, go ahead and send them to NoobCrafted@gmail.com. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the ladder.